Ready to take your music to the next level? Tune in to the Sound Strategies podcast. Let's keep you, the artist, in the driver's seat of your musical journey.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Harley?
I'm doing so well. It's wonderful to be talking to you, Ethan.
It is wonderful to be talking to you. So welcome, everybody, to the Sound Strategies podcast. This episode, we're talking to Harley Eblan. He is an amazing string instrument aficionado. There's so many things that he does with the strings, aside from just being a musician. But yeah, we're talking to Harley, and he's going to talk to us about how he's pretty much bootstrapped an entire session musician career using a handful of apps that you all know about or may not know about, but he's going to tell you about how he's used them and cobbled them together and made this life for himself that he's just in love with. So welcome, Harley.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited.
Yay! I have so many questions for you. And we can talk forever about this stuff. And it's super fun to talk. Talk to me a little bit. Let's start off with your journey. Like, how did you get here? Like, what was that like light bulb moment that made you think I have to do music?
Yeah, so I feel like I'll try to tell the condensed version, but I feel like my mom told me that when I was 2 days old, she put on a Stevie Ray Vaughan CD and I just stopped breathing. My eyes went wide and I was just locked in. So I feel like the light bulb moment might have been day 2 for me. Yeah, there's something about music that's just always like kind of taken my breath away. I've never been able to listen to music in the background. It's always, whenever music is on, it is my complete focus. Feels like a deficiency sometimes, but it's part of what led me to really pursue it. So I've been playing cello since I was 10 years old. I've got really interested in producing much more recently. I've done songwriting, played guitar, released some of my own music, but all of that journey has kind of led me to what I do now.
Awesome. And so tell us, let's go a little bit deeper into your story. So
yeah,
it sounds like it was a childhood. It was like, from day 1, obviously, day 2, like you were locked into music. When was it that it really started to resonate? Like, or this idea that, and you and I talked about this before this podcast, but I think we were talking about, I remember being on like a tour bus for this Olympic development program I was in soccer. And we were on our way to some tournament and I heard a Coldplay song from the Parachutes album.
Yeah.
And I heard the strings on it and my mind, I felt instantly like it had just come alongside me and it was now like acting as a soundtrack for the moment I was in at the moment, right? Like a soundtrack to my life at that moment. And ever since then I've been like really compelled to just like find string arrangements inside of pop songs, inside of indie songs, inside of any kind of genre of song. I love when I hear a string arrangement in there. And so when I stumbled across you on Instagram, I was like, this guy is doing what absolutely blew my mind when I was 14 years old. And I'm like, that's what he does for people. Like, people need to know about him. Like, he makes their songs more emotionally tuned, I would say, right?
I mean, honestly, that's kind of how I feel about the work I do, too. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm the guy that gets to do this for people. I've been thinking about this and like passionate about it since I was a kid. So growing up, I felt really, there was kind of a dichotomy in the music I listened to. Like I was studying classical music and I loved listening to Dvorak in particular, like just really diving into classical music and just putting a piece on my headphones over and over. Just listening to it on repeat and trying to think about like what decisions was the composer making, what decisions was the conductor making. But then I would like snap out of that and go listen to like In Sync and like Britney Spears. And so I grew up in both worlds and I felt like they never went together. But as I started listening closer to music, as I got older and got deeper into the practice of music and the industry of music, I started realizing that when those two worlds come together, when there are beautiful strings, or intense strings, beautiful isn't always the right adjective, but when there are the right strings for this song, it makes such a difference. And having studied the instrument and all of these genres my whole life, I started noticing more and more as I got deeper that I would hear strings on something and I was like, oh, that song works. Why are the strings on that song not working? And I started getting really passionate and frustrated about songs that felt like the strings weren't getting the music where it needed to be, where I felt like there was potential being left on the table.
Wow. You pretty much summed up like the driving force behind all of the work that any of us put energy into, right?
Yeah.
Like when you see that something is like missing something and you have happened to have been like studying this in your ears for like years and like also listening to pop music. So you're like, you have these mashup of two worlds like coming together and you know them both really well, but nobody's really combined them together in a way that you imagine could happen. Like,
right.
Like the perfect recipe for starting something new, right? Or like,
yeah. And it's kind of funny looking at past efforts to start something, because I've always been really excited and passionate about like, how do I make something? How do I do something important? How do I change something around me, build something that someone needs? And it's like, I was always reaching for things outside of myself. And I was like, that's a thing someone would want. And like the classic trying to start something and you're reaching for all the wrong things. And this, I just completely stumbled on this business. There was a version of it that was intentional, but it's not the version that ended up working. Like this, what I'm doing now is a series of accidents that I just kind of let happen.
Wow. So let's dig into exactly what you do, because I think that's really the focus of this podcast. Is I wanted to dig into this idea that, and we know that these platforms exist, things like Patreon, Kickstarter was before Patreon, right? Now you have Substacks, you have, all these ways that sound better, ways to make money doing music, right? Whether it's providing a service or providing content, or licensing your music or doing sync licensing. There's a lot of different things that you could do in order to receive money and keep doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So you chose a really fascinating way. And that was what I was really excited about when I started following you on Instagram. And I was like, dude, this guy, he's a content machine. And my first impression was, holy crap, he's a content creator. Like that was my first impression, as this guy's just straight, pure, unlaced content creator, right?
Yeah.
And after talking to you, I learned a lot more about your process and how you like took 8 months to actually learn how to create content, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have your camera's got different angles going on, you've got different shots. You're just nailing it. You've got text over your videos and Instagram. They're really engaging. And so that was my first impression, was like, this Harley guy knows how to create content, and not all musicians know how to create content. I barely know how to create content, right? And so I was just like, wow, I want to learn from this guy. Then my second take, or my second look at it, I was like, oh, he is a service provider. He is bootstrapping his business off of Instagram, like entirely. Like he's not doing this anywhere else. He is doing everything on Instagram. And that was when I was like, oh, wow, we really need to talk. Because I think there's so many more musicians out there that have not stumbled into the right business model for themselves. Like they might think that sync licensing is the thing because they were like, oh, I've heard that you can make a lot of money because now gaming's hot, TV's hot, all these reasons, right? People need it kind of thing. Like the market needs this. Whereas you just like stumbled through like a bunch of coincidences and really trying things, failing, and then trying something else until you got it right. So talk to me a little bit about this role that failure has, or this sort of like fail fast sort of mentality that you have in trying to get where you want to go. Yeah.
So I kind of jokingly, when I'm in a good mood, and not jokingly when I'm in a bit of a darker mood, describe my life as a series of failures. Because everything I've tried that I'm not doing now hasn't worked. Like learning is a string of failures, and it's been a lot about getting comfortable with that reality and that process of failing and getting over failure and learning from it, to get me where I am. But picking up in 2020, which I feel like is the series of failures that led me to what I'm doing now pretty directly. I was pursuing a career as a singer-songwriter. I had booked a bit of a house show tour to release an EP, did that whole thing. I was like, all right, this is the way to make money in music. I'm going to figure this out. I had a Patreon. It's like me making something that mattered to me for fans that paid me for that. That was the model I was pursuing. Lockdowns happened. The tour got canceled. I was relieved, which was really good insight for me. Didn't want to be on tour. I just thought I had to. And then I got really interested in the production side of music because through the process of making an EP, I realized I don't know anything about the stuff that's around me or the process of getting my idea from a song in the room to a song on a recording that can reach more people. I was like, that process is a mystery to me. Let me figure that out. I have these, like, COVID's a thing. I'm going to be inside for the next week or two. Maybe I'll learn how to use a DAW a little better. That maybe a week or two turned into a year. And I spent most of that time teaching myself how to produce and how to effectively use a DAW to communicate the songs that I'd been writing.
Yeah.
As I grew into that, I was working with other producers. I made a shot at releasing something. It didn't go how I wanted it to. And I was approached by a music business coach who basically offered me the opportunity to look at the music industry differently. Mm-hmm. And that was a painful and terrifying moment. Mm-hmm. He challenged me on some of my assumptions about the music industry, and I couldn't sleep for a week. Wanted to quit a whole 9 yards. It was like a real existential crisis. But I realized that was the light bulb moment where I realized that I could take the things I've learned in music and provide them as a service to other people. And that it was something I was excited about and felt authentic and creative and fulfilling. So from there, I set out working with this coach to build a production business. And I got told no over and over and over and over. I got on dozens and dozens of calls and just had people say, oh, maybe, I don't know. And it was painful. And that was a massive failure for me. I booked a couple of jobs from that and struggled with them. But over time, people started realizing that I played the cello and would say, oh, I don't need a producer, but can you play cello? And as I took the hint that no one trusted me as a producer, but people trusted me as a cellist, I started exploring ways of diving into that world deeper and realized that was the moment I started realizing that all of the things I've done throughout my life led more clearly to strings, adding strings to people's work than to producing necessarily. And ironically, I'm back to producing for a few people, but it was through the process of string arranging. So ironically, I kind of accomplished the original goal by failing at it, finding a new thing and building the original idea back on top of it on accident. So yeah, I feel like that's a condensed version.
No, that's beautiful. So I wanted to circle back to two things. And one was, I think that everybody struggles with this idea of when to let go, right?
Yeah.
So when do you let go of an idea? So like we talked a lot about how you failed and then learned and then tried something else. Yeah. But that like time between failure and learning can be short or it can be long. And the time between learning, being depressed, having existential crises, and then trying something else could also be short or it could be long. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? But it's just, there is some time that you've got to put in. There is some time you've got to book in there, right?
Yeah.
So now talk a little bit about how you get through those sort of nebulous time slots, if you will.
We're digging in here. Yeah, a lot of crying, a lot of not wanting to get out of bed, a lot of feeling like quitting everything, a lot of feeling like your life is over. But I feel like a lot of this process has brought me more and more towards reading philosophy, and meditation and taking walks in the forest. And I don't know, learning to, I think that the big thing for me in that has been trying to learn over time and practice, not shying away from the thing that's painful just because it's painful. So if I'm getting feedback in my work, if I'm consistently being told that's not working or that thing isn't what I need this thing. Remembering that it's not a reflection on who I am as a person.
Yep.
And understanding that it is just good information on how to grow further. But it's one thing to cognitively know that and another thing to feel and believe it. And I feel like that's what that time and that work is. It's closing the gap between knowing something to be true and feeling something to be true.
Yep. That's a big one. Like the feeling in your body. So I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here, but I'm really big on like personality tests. I always ask people like what their Myers-Briggs is. Like I know our producer, Ted Thump, we call him, he's not on this podcast. He's listening, making sure our vocals are okay and he can actually edit this podcast. But Ted and I talk a lot about like philosophy and and just there's a lot of like introspection that has to happen in this world, right? Like, because music is I feel like we have such an emotional attachment to our work, and we have such an emotional attachment to our time. Like work and time in the music industry, I feel like are the two kind of major scarcities, I guess. And so we pay a lot of attention to it. And so it causes a lot of us to be like up and down, right? Like it's a really high, low sort of roller coaster. So philosophy, spirituality, knowing yourself, right? Knowing like how to accept feelings, like what that old adage, like what you resist persists. I find to be really true.
100%.
And so, that all goes back to you talking about how you had to actually feel it instead of sort of think it, right? Like you can't really, with emotional things of emotional attachments to, you can't really think your way out of the box, right? Like it's not a Rubik's Cube that you can just think the right thoughts and read the right philosophy books and come out the other side okay. Like you have to actually feel those feelings, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important. And I think what you said about just like crying, physically not being able to get out of bed, but feeling that pain is so important.
Yeah.
There's a neuroscience lab, and I'll put the name of it in the show notes once I remember. But there's a professor at Stanford who has been doing a lot of podcasting and things. So he's kind of brought the neuroscience lab research work to the masses, right? And one of the things I was reading yesterday that he was talking about was, we're always trying to find the thing that we're like, that job that doesn't feel like work, right? Yeah. So like, what is the thing that I could do in my life that like wouldn't feel like work? And I would wake up every day and I'd be passionate about doing it. And I could avoid pain essentially, right? And one of the things that he said is that like, they actually tested in his lab, like whether doing hard things that you hate doing increases your muscle for being more resilient or doing easy things that you love. Right. Yeah. And of course the answer, we don't want it to be the answer, but the answer was indeed doing hard things that you hate doing. So if it's me realizing I've got to spend 4 hours listening to podcasts and writing show notes on them, and I hate sitting and doing that, right? Like doing that task will actually make me more resilient and give me more grit than doing the things that I'm really naturally good at, which is actually sales calls, essentially. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's just like an interesting concept that I think kind of dovetails with that, like feeling your feelings, feeling the failure, going through all the pain and then coming out the other side, right? Like the thing that you are resisting that you don't want is usually the thing that will actually make you better and stronger and more resilient.
Ironically, for me, that was content. That was social media. That was Instagram.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you were resistant to social media at first? Like it doesn't come naturally to you is what you're saying? No,
not at all.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
For those of you who feel like a little self-punishment. You can scroll way back on my social media feed and see how painful my journey in this was. The first, I always love telling this story. The first video I shot for social media intentionally, when I was like, okay, if I want to do this, I need to build a brand. I need to start figuring out content marketing. I think all told, it took me about 15 hours to make the first 30-second clip. Because I was like, how do I edit a video? How do I do this? How do I do that? Like, I would go to hit record and my hand would be shaking too hard. And so I would have to calm down. And then I would shoot something and watch it back. I was like, that didn't work. So it's been an incredibly challenging journey for me. Mm-hmm. I had basically deleted all my social media platforms for the year before I went all in on building a business on Instagram. And so I was in the space of life is good without social media. This is wonderful. I get to focus on being creative. There's these wonderful channels. I feel open and more expressive and less anxious. And then I was like, okay, how do I hold that feeling and bring Instagram back in? So almost getting to use that as a foil for this calm that I was feeling and practice finding that centeredness within a space that isn't designed for it. So it's we live in a chaotic world. We have to learn how to function well in a chaotic world. And so trying to learn how to bring that peace and centeredness from life without social media into being a content marketer.
Yeah.
It's been a really interesting journey. But like you said, it's something I resisted. It's something I didn't want to do. And it's something that I hated.
Yeah.
But it made me stronger. Ironically, it's deepened my meditation practice. It's made me more intentional about my use of technology. Wow. I don't have a smartphone anymore because I realized I wanted that boundary between myself and my business and the content that I was creating. When it was in my pocket all the time and I could pull something out and see oh, this piece of content's working, I should think about more content ideas, or, oh, I should respond to that thing, or, oh, look, this person wants to hire me. It was this dopamine rush constantly. And I had to remove that from that aspect of my life. I try to keep that in this studio that I'm in as much as possible.
Wow. So what does that look like? Take me through your day.
Yeah. So I try to be really intentional about how I use my time and energy. I don't always succeed, but the intention has been building this up over time. I wake up. I love waking up before the sun comes up. It's easier this time of year as we're getting into fall, winter. But I wake up. I like to read a little bit. I like to read philosophy or nonfiction or something in the morning to make me think. And then I will meditate and then just try to have a slow morning. I wake up before my partner. But then by the time I finish those self-care things, she's usually up and ready for work. But we'll sit and have coffee and talk for a while until she goes to work. And then I will come into this space and start my day. But having that time I can be me without being my job or my work has been really important. Oh, and actually, something I've been also doing recently is when she goes to work, I go with her. We live in a small town, Ashland, Oregon, and she works at the Shakespeare Festival. And right past where she works is this park that goes all the way back into the forest.
That park is amazing. Yeah.
So I am so fortunate. I go for a walk in there every morning.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I get to meditate and center myself and then go for a walk in the woods and have to shoo deer out of my way to go down the path and get to sit by a stream. And then I come in and I'm all right, what does my day look like? What are my responsibilities? What are my goals?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's been huge for me because when I don't carve that out for myself, I can hit deadlines, but I feel terrible in the process and the quality of my work degrades and the energy that I bring to my content, to my calls, to my interactions with people, it goes down. And the business doesn't function as well. So I actually consider that work. I consider the self-care one of the most important parts of the work I do.
Wow. No, talk to me a little bit, if you're comfortable, talk to me a little bit about the role of philosophy or spirituality, or what do you lean on when you're having these existential crises? Like, do you have a mentor you reach out to? What is in your toolbox for surviving those low points?
Yeah, that's always developing. As a kid, my mom took me for the first time to a Unitarian Universalist church. And the joke about UU congregations is that it's like the Neapolitan religion, like Neapolitan ice cream. It's like a little bit of everything and kind of nothing at the same time. But it's a community that doesn't have a doctrine or creed that you have to believe to be a part of it. It's essentially a group of people that are all spiritually seeking in a mutually supportive environment where basically anything goes as long as you are doing your best to be a good person.
Yeah.
And I've found the congregation here, I found to be such a wonderful, like, little support system. And just like an anchor that I know on the weekend I can go and slow down and tap into whatever I need and feel the things and think about bigger things than myself or my job or the problems I'm experiencing. It's like, oh, it's fine that I didn't land that job. Like, I didn't need it to be whole. Yeah. So that's big for me. And also stoicism. I found a lot of solace in over the last few years. There's a book called The Daily Stoic that I read every morning after I meditate. And it's just really wonderful and pragmatic. And a lot of like, the basic gist of that is like, we're all going to die. So just like kind of be yourself, and it doesn't matter as much as you think it matters.
Right.
So I find a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah. Amazing. So let's jump to your tech stack. So this is a little bit of a reach, but let's go into sort of like how you set up your business. What are you using? What's working really, really well? What surprises have you found along the way that you're like, oh, wow, like this actually is really, really compelling to work on or work with?
Yeah.
Tool?
The core of it for me, in this conversation, I'm going to keep coming back to Notion. I have a really close friend and mixing engineer. He lives in Los Angeles. Love him as a person and admire his work in what he does. But he turned me on to Notion setup that he's been developing over the past several years. And he's gone so deep on this. And I don't think I would have found my way here without his guidance. But basically, I use Notion for just about everything. I have interlocking databases. Notion at its core, it's like spreadsheets that you can use as databases that interlink, and you can do design around them. So I have a list of all the people that I want to work with, have worked with, think I might get to work with, of like people I've worked with, the people they've worked with, all of it. Everyone just goes in this one list. And then there's a list of projects that I've worked on or are coming up. Those things interlink. The list of people, I have all sorts of ways that I sort it, and that's my CRM. That's my, I forgot what that even stands for. It'll come to me later after this call when it's no longer useful. But basically, it's just a way of keeping track of my leads and clients. Client relationship manager. There we go. Customer relationship manager. Okay. Big fan of having a system for that because it's allowed me to build relationships with hundreds of people. More people than I could manually keep track of and know when the right time to follow up with them was, and the thing we had talked about last time. So I just keep notes on my conversations with people, set follow-up reminders for myself, and reach out, and have built... It can sound kind of conniving when you think about it just from that perspective, but the way I think about it is that's a tool that allows me to keep track of the people whose music and lives I care about, and find ways that I can support them, both in the work that I do and outside of the work that I do. Maybe it's just seeing how they're doing and connecting, catching up. Maybe it's seeing if they need a mixing engineer or a producer and connecting them with someone else in that CRM that I know they would get along with. I love doing that. And that's been a big part of the growth of my business. So I feel like Notion is the core. And from there, I can link the project that I'm going to be working on. So if I have a follow-up call and they're like, oh, I need you for this thing, I can just make another page and track the status of that project connected to the person's file in my CRM.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So I don't think I could survive without that.
Okay, so Notion is like your nucleus of your business, essentially, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like it has lots of arms and it can actually connect to lots of different things, right?
Yeah.
So Notion is the bomb. Like, I mean, people love Notion. I've used it on and off for different things, and I stick with Google Docs just because I can kind of use Sheets the same way, right? I can link to projects, link to docs inside of Sheets, and that way, like, the project has a home, but then it's also inside of a spreadsheet. I recently, actually, Allie, my partner and co-founder, she has been using Pipedrive for a side project.
Yeah.
And she really likes Pipedrive, so she's been trying to get me to test it. So today I'm going to be testing Pipedrive. But I think the exciting part about Pipedrive is just that, and talk about conniving, Pipedrive actually tells you who's visiting your site without them doing anything, taking any action, essentially. So, so that's interesting, I guess. I'm not as interested in that part of it, but that is kind of interesting and neat. But the thing that I do like about it is that, like, they have their own, it would be like you could drop your email client, like your, or email provider, like say I use MailChimp right now. I used to use SendFox, which I think you use SendFox, right?
Yeah, currently.
Yeah. SendFox is awesome because it's an AppSumo app. So, they give you like a basically like a lifetime. Like you can they charge you, like, I forget how much I paid for like lifetime. Like the
first year's $50. Yeah.
Yeah, $50. Yeah, it's really inexpensive. And I think I bought it when AppSumo was doing a deal, I think, and they always do lifetime deals. So like I just love that concept. SaaS products, although our company is a SaaS product, gets annoying. You're just like, why am I paying every month forever for this, you know?
Yeah.
So AppSumo is cool for those sorts of things with software tools that, like, you want to buy once or you want to buy on a significant discount. So you got Notion going. What about invoicing people? How are you getting paid?
Yeah, so currently I run all that through Wave. They have a free invoicing platform and their processing fees are pretty standard. Okay. So I've found that to work well. I can set up payment plans for people. I can split things into deposit and remainder invoices. I can track payments and stuff. Cool. And then I log things from there in Notion. And over time, I am looking to essentially, I get so excited about tools. And I had a mentor once years ago talk about the difference between work and work about work. And I've tried to be really conscious about that since. I could be happy, maybe not fulfilled, but I could be excited on a day-to-day basis just coming in and reevaluating my systems and setup and tools. Okay. Now I'm just fixated on Pipedrive. I'm like, I need to go research Pipedrive. Yeah. And I'm like, I have to go record, actually. That's the thing I have to do. But yeah, so I currently use Wave for invoicing, but I'm looking at things like Honeybook and Dubsado that have integrated CRMs and invoicing and contracts and stuff like that. But up till now, I really have avoided those SaaS products as much as possible. There are some things that the SaaS products are absolutely worth it for, like file sharing and backup and storage and things like that. Yeah. But when there's a free product available, I try to use it. And then when there is a problem that arises with my use of the free product, then I will explore avenues for paying for replacements and think about that price as how much is the problem worth solving for me. So that's how I find my way to the paid products in the process of bootstrapping a business, because every dollar I spend on something is a dollar I can't spend on something else.
Yeah.
Be it my salary or an upgrade, a microphone or a new tool, something like that.
Yep. Makes total sense. I think that's exactly how I feel. I'll try the free one. Of course, I'll research the crap out of it so that it's like the best free one, right? Like I'm not gonna like spend a lot of time setting up systems in software that just isn't gonna work for me. But but that's I think that's a good method, really. So we've talked a lot about tools. We've talked a lot about your journey, about sort of your philosophy around music and life. Tell me more about content. Like, so you spent a year basically like teaching yourself how to create quality content, right?
Yeah.
What can one expect? Like if they're, no matter what they are, if they are, providing a service in music, or if they're, trying to go at it from like more of like a singer-songwriter perspective. Mm-hmm. If they're on Instagram, what can they expect as far as creation, as far as like the momentum they can get, and what's kind of expected? Like, what does it take?
I'm not going to lie, it's really hard. It's really, 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 really challenging. I have gone through a lot of ups and downs with it. Again, a lot of tears, a lot of not wanting to get out of bed. I have experienced very slow growth, but that's because my goal with my content is essentially, one of the big goals with my content is showing the work that I can do for people, showcasing that, displaying it, and talking about how I can serve someone so they can imagine themselves working with me after watching my content. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, in growing the business and trying to build a reputation, it's been presenting who I am and what it is like to communicate with me. So one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten is someone had been watching my content, and this has happened a few times now, and it fills me with joy. But if someone has been watching my content for a while and then reaches out and we get on a call to talk about possibly working together and exploring the details of that, I've had a few people say, talking to you is just like watching your content. And I cannot imagine a higher compliment in terms of the work I'm doing on Instagram, because that's the goal. The goal is for someone to feel comfortable enough with me to essentially say yes to hopping on a call with a stranger on the internet and then sending them money and trusting them with like art that you feel passionate about. Emotionally, it's a big ask that I'm that I'm asking people. So my journey with Instagram has been really interesting, because for a long time I was getting here's the work I do, here's how this happens. And again, if you hate yourself, you can scroll back on my Instagram like a year and see like before the lighting set up and before like I knew how to use the camera, like me trying and kind of failing at this. But the turning point for me, where I started seeing more momentum and I've started finding what works, is a friend almost exactly a year ago now pulled me aside, and they are phenomenal at content. Their name is Alyssa Wilkins. They're a producer. They've built their business on Instagram and TikTok as well. I've learned so much from them. One of my best friends at this point. But they pulled me aside and said, making videos is art. It isn't just an art to figuring out how, but the video, the thing you're making, can be art. And they looked at my content and said, you don't think about it like that. They pointed out that I consider the recording work I do and the music I make to be art. And my videos were a concession I was making to getting to make the music. And that resonated and filled me with despair and made me take a step back. And it was around the holidays last year, and I stopped. I basically took a week off of work and just watched videos on lighting. I was like, how do you light a shot? How do you use a DSLR? Because I had a DSLR, but I was just setting it to auto and hoping it was okay.
Yeah.
But like, how do you use this camera? What lighting panels do I need? Bought a couple on Amazon. I rearranged my studio. I knew how to make this space sound good, but I had done nothing to make it look good as well and find shots. Yeah. I spent a couple days finding shots, testing things out, testing settings, and then I made a video. And I posted it, and it got 10 times more views. I was like, okay.
She's right.
There's something to this. I was like, okay, they have a point. So I realized that if you're going to do content marketing, it has to be art. And once I allowed myself to go down those rabbit holes and get excited about it and passionate about it and have fun making something that felt authentic, I got excited. Like at this point, so my more recent videos, I wasn't even planning on showing this, but right now I'm using a plant as my microphone stand for the conversation we're having right now, because that's what I've been doing for my videos. And it's something that I've gotten really into plants in my own life. We have dozens of plants all over the house now. And I was thinking, how can I bring plants into my studio? How can I make this space aesthetic? How can I bring that part of my personality and visual aesthetic into my videos? Yeah. And I was like, oh, hold it. And that kind of creative decision making wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been playful and considered the work I was doing their art.
Yeah.
But it was a hard journey to get there.
Yeah, so, I bet. It sounds like it. Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been amazing. I feel like I just had I just took a bath. Like my soul just took a bath. Like I got cleansed. Talking to Harley.
Oh, good.
It's so nice to dig into the meaning behind everything and just why we do what we do and what's hard. And I just love discussing this stuff so much. So. Oh,
me too. I feel like that's where my brain is all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. So now tell me, so we talked a little bit about, I think it was last week, or no, a couple weeks ago now, we were talking about your process on Instagram and how basically your entire funnel happens on Instagram. Not to talk, I mean, I am one part business person. I'm one part, I want to see musicians find their authentic voice. And then the other part of me is I want them to make a shit ton of money too. I have my little purple devil ears go up and I'm okay, how do this? So I like to break down the way that you like to break down the sound in your room and the tools and the processes that you're using. I like to figure out a puzzle, how does Harley make more money so that he can get better gear, so that he can, move to a better studio, whatever it is that he desires, right? So when we talk about sales funnels, your entire sales funnel is with the exception of the database side of it, which is in Notion, is you're doing everything in Instagram.
Yeah.
Right. So your I mean, there is a bunch of buyer psychology out there, right? But you're pretty much prepping the buyer, you're pre-selling to the buyer with your videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, this is why you should trust me. This is what I can create for you, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Even the quality of the videos are showing people, this is how serious I take my work.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all trust, validation. And then it sounds like there is also an outreach component, where you're actually reaching out to folks. And so tell me a little bit about what kind of tricks you've learned for that or on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of bending the tool to do something that it's not really designed to do, right?
And I'm walking a line with it, which is really interesting. So I feel vulnerable that my whole funnel is on Instagram, and that is something I'm actively exploring right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to expand how that funnel works and rethinking how it can be more sustainable long term. But yeah, right now there is the content side of things. And I think of these as separate but complementary. There's the content side, and then there's the communication side. And that happens all in Instagram DMs. but they feed off of each other. I started by learning the communication and DM side. And I learned how to reach out to people. I learned how to start conversations, learned how to drive conversations, had to step outside my comfort zone, learn where the line was by stepping over it.
Yep.
There's some people out there that have a really bad impression of me, which is fine.
Typical. That's exactly how sales
work. It's gonna happen no matter what I'm doing, where I am.
Yeah.
I've done everything right in some cases, and people have a bad impression of me, and I've done everything wrong. There's a sales call that I felt like I botched 2 years ago, but the guy's coming up to my apartment to stay for the weekend soon because we're friends now.
Yeah.
So no expectation. It's all a learning process.
Yeah.
But so the content side, I think about as top of funnel, but also as middle of funnel. So top of funnel, when it pleases the algorithm gods and it gets shared and reaches new people and people follow me from that content, great. That can serve as top of funnel. Mm-hmm. But and then as middle of funnel, it's that communication and keeping that one-to-many dialogue going where I can stay top of mind for people. But I have not found that content on its own converts for me. Mm-hmm. So the thing that converts is the personal interaction and connection. Mm-hmm. And part of that, I would imagine, is because trusting someone with the art that is most precious to you is not... That's a hard thing to sell one-to-many. Mm-hmm. I've found that it has to come from built-up trust. Mm-hmm. So for me, at the stage my business is at, the best way is still with that one-on-one communication. So I will check in with people from time to time. Mm-hmm. And often now that my content is functioning better, they'll say, "Oh, I've been thinking about you. Mm-hmm. I meant to reach out. I was going to do that." Mm-hmm. And it's so... I hear that so much more often than I actually get the reach out. It's become almost comical to me at this point. Yes. And if you're listening to this and you've said that to me, I love you. Don't worry. But the one-to-one communication in the Instagram DMs, and then taking it outside of DMs to a call, face-to-face, a video call.
Okay.
But yeah.
Do you find a difference between being able to convert over video versus just an audio call? Or?
I've done so many more video calls than audio calls that they are where I am more comfortable now. But there are times when it's an audio call, and that's what works best. Okay. So I don't feel like I have enough data in my own business to say one way or the other, but I know a lot of people that have had a lot better success over video than audio.
Okay.
The extra dimension where you can read facial expression and communicate. There's less, in my brain, there's less going on where I'm trying to interpret what someone's saying.
Yeah.
And I can be more natural.
Yep. Yeah. I'm even noticing, like, when I look in your studio, like behind you, like that 3D space is actually filling in a lot of questions that my brain is trying to ask. Right.
And that's intentional.
Yeah. Exactly. It makes a lot of sense. So there was one little thing that you did that I thought was really brilliant, and I stumbled across it a couple times once I started following you, is that you would use that feature in Instagram where you would somebody else would play a song, right? And then you would play over it. You would write a string arrangement, right? Yeah. For that song specifically, and play over it, and then tag that artist in it, right?
Yeah.
And so you were creating reels essentially, right? And then tagging the artist in it. That to me was so brilliant. And I was like, wait a sec, tell me more about that. So tell me, how do you choose what songs to do this to?
So I have gotten more and more careful over time about what songs I choose, because there's a lot of labor involved and I don't do as many of them as before. Yeah. It's hard to stay consistent with content when I have to write and record an arrangement for every video.
Yeah.
So I use those sparingly. But I have a couple of different ways that I choose the videos. The main one lately has been when I'm going through that CRM, my database of people in Notion that I have worked with or want to work with. I think about, if I click into a profile and I think that person's a little out of my reach right now, they're working with people that I perceive at least as a step or two above where my business is functioning. Their audience is 2 or 3 times bigger than anyone I've worked with. I'll look and see if they have any content that I can do that with as a way to introduce myself without asking anything from them. So if there's a video that I find compelling, I look for the numbers the video has done on its own already to see, was this inherently compelling to people? And then can I add something to it? From there, I go to a third-party like video downloader and like paste the URL and like rip the video. I don't even know. I don't know. Should I be saying that? Is it even legal? But
I have no idea. To be honest, I have no idea. But that's not the purpose of this video, so don't worry.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I need a lawyer, whatever.
Yeah.
But so I'll throw the video in my DAW and I will maybe do a little processing to the audio because it's often people with a phone in a weird sounding room. But I will then record an arrangement over it and then lip sync or cello sync on video to it. And I've gotten that process to the point where if I'm really moving, I can have all of the assets recorded, both audio and video, in about hour and a half for that.
Wow.
Used to take me like a full day.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been
it would
a
take
series.
Me like 3 days.
Yeah. 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 So again, the first video I made, it took me 15 hours because I'm like, what's a video editing tool? So it's to the point now where I can crank them out, but it's still challenging. So I'm sparing with what I do those with. So yeah, it's like to really try to.
So like, it's basically like an introduction, right? Like it's almost like a cold call, but you're not putting them in an uncomfortable situation because they don't have to sit there and listen to you talk.
Yeah. And when it's people farther along than me, I get responses maybe half the time.
Yeah.
Which as far as reaching out, it's not bad.
No.
And it ranges from like never a like or share or anything to people like downloading the video without telling me, reposting it on their profile, sharing it in their stories, saying, holy shit, you're hired. Like it's the full range. But even when someone doesn't respond, I've noticed what happens. And one of the ways I built up initial trust in my business and my work was I noticed people reaching out to me and saying, hey, I saw you worked with that person. And it was just a video I made.
Yeah.
And like the person had never even responded to me.
Yeah.
But even just the perception of me working with those people and on that level, seeing my face next to their face, hearing my work on their song.
Yeah.
It was fascinating what that did to perception.
Yeah. I think you and I talked a little bit about this when I started asking you, are you creating, there's this idea of like, there's like sales funnels. There's also like this idea of like having like a value ladder, right? So giving your customers like something small for maybe like a smaller price, right? Because we talked about how your price point's really high. So you need fewer customers, more, higher with a higher price point, which is awesome. But how do people interact with you and get value out of you that aren't willing to pay that high price, right? And so that's where like a value ladder would come in. And so we were thinking about it and I was like, I really feel like just how high of quality your videos have gotten combined with like just your personality. Like you're just like a jovial dude and you're really kind and you like to share and you like to learn. I think that comes off really clearly, like out the gate, like in any content I watched of yours, which I think is interesting. But like, that's a really good, like, starting point. Like you have basically the blueprints for being a teacher, right? And there's things that you could teach that could be recurring revenue for you, like multiple, like basically you do the work once and you get multiple sales from it, right?
Yeah.
So we were talking through this a little bit and I lost my train of thought. Where was I going?
No, we were talking about value ladder and I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, let's talk about value. Let's just dig into that a little bit. But I had somewhere where I was going where we had talked about something. I'll circle back to that. Let's go deeper into value ladder. Like, have you thought through what is that? Because your value ladder goes from 0 to 60, so to speak, very quickly.
It does.
what are some ways that you could actually compress that or fill in those gaps for people?
So I have a whole list of projects, again, in Notion, that
Yeah.
are ideas about how to fill in that value ladder. But the thing that I found fascinating is, and the reason I haven't executed on those projects yet, is that my business takes a lot of that one-to-one energy at present.
Yeah.
So my focus, whenever I've taken my eye off the ball on having my steady client base and the jobs coming in, then that has started to slip while I focus on trying to build something that might help the value ladder.
Yeah.
So I am still in the phase where I'm working on stabilizing that revenue stream that I already have. And just anchoring it and making it function better without as much one-to-one time and energy from me. So I just hired a social media intern to help take some of that effort of editing every one of the videos and coming up with every video idea off my plate. So that I can still keep up that one-to-many communication while exploring something like we talked about working with you and Tonic Audio about some sort of education platform or course. So that kind of thing really fascinates me.
Right? Like to me,
Absolutely.
I'm like the educational piece. You record it once, takes you three days, maybe. You know, you got to write, record, edit, all that. Could take up to a week, I would say. It could take much longer if you want to go really, really deep and and really, really hit it out of the park. But regardless, I think you could do a bang up job in like a week, right? So you have to give up a week. But then in my mind, I'm like, okay, like how do you diversify, right? Like your whole business is on Instagram, which has been affordable. I mean, it's made it really accessible and affordable for you as you first started out. But
I'm also vulnerable to Mark Zuckerberg's whims, which is not not ideal.
Not ideal to have an algorithm like deciding your future, right?
Yeah.
So like the easiest way in my mind is like you start siphoning those guys into your own mailing list, and then your mailing list. So like and then you need a lead magnet for your mailing list. So maybe the educational pieces are a lead magnet, right? So like there's all these ways to mash it up, of course. And I totally hear you on the, like, you don't want to keep your eye off the ball because you found something that's working. Your mentors are telling you and holding you accountable to stay focused. So I think that's always something that like you can just work into your schedule over time. You don't have to drop everything. You just like over time start to pick off those task lists, Yeah. But I could see you doing really well with content because with courses, just because you're a likable dude and you're interested in the subject matter and passionate about it, and you're passionate about sharing with people. And so I just want to encourage you that like you already have the ingredients. So if you ever wanted to do that, I think it would be a natural fit. And I hope that you do create some content I'm always thinking like one to many, like how do you make the largest impact in the world, right? And like maybe you write strings for somebody really, really famous and that song goes to 100 million people, but maybe not, maybe there's other ways for your personality and your particular experiences to be shared with the world in a one-to-many fashion. So
now that this conversation is public, I'm there's a little accountability because I am excited about pursuing these ideas.
Yes, by design, by the way, by design. Okay, cool. So before we wrap up, so I want to talk a little bit about Tonic Audio and kind of what we do there. And there were a couple of things that came to mind when we talked. You had said if somebody could solve file sharing, I would be so excited. Tell me a little bit about your experience with file sharing, what you like, what you don't like, what you dream it could be.
I feel like file sharing for me and other producers and engineers I work with, it's such an interesting and challenging point because the tools aren't built for us.
Yeah.
So I feel like as a string arranger, my deliveries are a little bit wonky. So I will send a rough mix of the reference that a client sent with all of my strings over top, way too loud for the final mix, but just so they can, in one file, quickly listen wherever they are. There's also all of the stems. So there's like there's all the strings isolated, and then there's like just the reverb and just the violins, just the cellos, just the highs, lows, things like that. But then it's all of the broken out tracks. So once you're getting into all those broken out tracks on a 3, 4, maybe 5-minute song, they're all 24-bit, 48 kilohertz wave files. I've got a folder that's between 1 and 3.5 gigabytes usually. So I chew through
essentially
for each project. Okay. And I'm trying to deliver 1 to 2 projects a week usually.
Okay.
So like I will generate gigabytes of files a week.
Yep.
And I have to manage archiving, storage, sharing, all of that stuff. So I think a lot about file size and management, and a lot of people in this industry do. Mm-hmm. So I've gone through so many different workflows, and basically my dream, I'm trying to get it to the point where I can bounce something and just drag a file into another place. I've had this dream that Dropbox and Google Drive can do that. And every time I build a system that I think works, it breaks. Yeah. It's like a Mac update breaks it, or Google Drive or Dropbox like starts handling things differently, and they're like, oh, we don't do that anymore, and my clients can't access files. So I feel like I'm a niche use case in so many ways where I feel caught between the cracks. So my dream is just for that to be simple, and for musicians to be front of mind from the platform's perspective.
Yeah, that was the same feeling that we were having using Dropbox. We were with you. Like, we want it just to be dead simple. Like, drag and drop, not having, if you are going to be able to sync with your hard drive, like that stuff should always work and not be broken, so that like every other time you're all of a sudden going back into like, it's already an administrative task to share files. Yeah. But then if you're also going to this like process-minded analytical mind, because you've now got to fix the process itself, now you're like 2 steps behind, So like, so all of that we're really trying to avoid, especially like we started with like a web interface only. And like that was part of it, is that we wanted it to be very universal for anybody,
Yeah.
And so I think that's and we talked about our product roadmap a bit when we talked before, and like we want to be able to have, we have slated for Q1 of next year of like creating basically like a VST plugin that will be universal for all, all DAWs, all experiences, all computers. And even like, it's funny, I read some Reddit posts yesterday about some complaints that people had, or just like some inadequacies of like other platforms are out there, like Patreon's best in class, like undoubtedly best in class. And they were saying like, it's so crazy because like even Patreon that knows us the best, like doesn't realize that like we are on Patreon because we're starving artists. Like not all of us have like the newest MacBook, right? And so like there were a lot of people that like just didn't have the ability or like the Wi-Fi connection that was fast enough to do the things that it's expecting you to do, So these are all things that we're constantly reading about, trying to like grapple with so that we can get it right for you guys, right?
And I feel like that's the thing that excites me most about Tonic Audio in particular, is the conversations that I've had with you, Ethan. That we talked about, you mentioned that the thing you're trying to avoid the most is the enshittification of the app. Like, we all know the experience of coming to rely on a tool and then like some company buying the tool and just totally breaking it. Or even just they pivot to try to approach a new customer base, and it's like the thing you were doing just doesn't work anymore. So I'm excited that this, like, already this feels like a partnership. Like, I messaged you about having an issue the other day, and you got back right away with like a bug fix log. I was like, oh, okay, let me go see now. It's exciting.
That makes me so happy that you notice those things, because Allie, like, it's pretty awesome because we're co-founders, but we're also partners, and we've been married for like been together 16 years. And she really is kind of like, we're like Pinky in the Brain, like it's like I can just like be like, hey, like she can do the analytical, fix it, build it sort of thing, and then I can be like out Like, I kind of feel like she's like FDR and I'm Eleanor Roosevelt.
Best analogy.
Yeah, right? Like, so Eleanor's out there, like, just like basically on the ground, like hearing what people want and need, and she's coming back and reporting to him, and then he's making decisions. And even though I'm the CEO, technically, like, we really just like co-lead the company, but she just does it from an engineering side. And I try to leave her alone as much as possible so that she can actually go deep dive, right? But she's extraordinarily responsive. And so we have this trust where, like, if I do ping her, she knows it's important. And so I can ping her and be like, hey, this like upload's broken. Check this bug. And she'll check it. And then she'll come back to me and be like, I can't reproduce that bug. Can you get some more information? Then I'll go back, get some more information. But like, she'll do that so quickly. Like, she'll be doing something. She'll be out of office somewhere else working on a different project. And like, she'll fix it. And I'll be like, holy crap. Like, you know, like, that's why I love Slack so much, right? It's just
that's incredible.
It's an app that works for us and makes our lives so much simpler. So
yeah,
asynchronous communication, I think, is really exciting to me. And that kind of goes into like more of like our philosophy around Tonic Audio and like why we're so passionate about asynchronous remote collaboration. And I think that's like, because like, we know we've been married long enough, we're totally different personalities. Like, on Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP and she's an INFJ. So like, we're very, very different. We see the world very similarly, but we're also very different. And so like, we realized early days that like, we needed to be able to communicate asynchronously as much as we did synchronously.
Yeah.
Because it gave us time to think through what we needed to do, right? And it gave us time. It cancels out that issue around like me being an extrovert and being very chatty, of like not letting her finish her sentence, right? Not letting her think through something. She likes to think through processing.
Yeah.
Whereas I like to think about them out loud, right? So we really, really like this asynchronous style of communicating. And so, you know, even when we started Tonic, we were like, oh my gosh, like this is such great timing. Like, we're passionate about asynchronous remote collaboration. The world is passionate about it because they have to be. It's the pandemic, and it happens to be that like technology is going so fast that like you can, you know, set up a rig in your home office or in a corner of your living room and you can record amazing music. And so we're just really passionate about people being able to do that. And that's kind of like, it's all comes from just like us stumbling into things that work for us. Right. And then being like, wait a sec, like everybody needs this and it's not done very well right now. Right. And mostly because the big behemoths they're really good and they've gotten really good at most aspects of it, but it's not a very specific niche process for musicians, right? Or tailored for musicians. So
absolutely.
But I think the other thing too, I think we talked about was like Instagram has become sort of your platform, right? Your business model. And we talked a little bit about Sound Better. So before you were on Instagram, you were doing business on Sound Better, offering your services as a producer, right? And so that is an example. Sound Better is a platform where it's a marketplace essentially, right? You can go on there and see Harley has all his stats, almost like baseball stats, right? Like, I worked with this artist and you know, here's the tools I use, et cetera. Here's my price. It's very transactional. For us, it felt really very transactional. And we were like, there's got to be a better way, because it feels like you don't always get matched up with the right match, you know?
Sound Better didn't resonate with me. Okay. I routed all of my clients' payments through Sound Better for a while in order to game the platform, rise up the rankings. I ended up in the top 5. I was in the first row of cellists. I think I was number 4 or 5, bouncing back and forth there. There's not a lot of active cellists and string arrangers on the platform, so it was quick for me to rise up those rankings.
Cool.
I got there. I got a few jobs, and they weren't the ones that lit me up.
Okay.
I was still seeking out work on Instagram, and I was finding all of the things I was excited about there. And then I would find the like nitpicky people with the song that felt a little off the wall to me on Sound Better.
Yeah.
And it just like, it didn't resonate. And actually now, coming full circle, I've had multiple conversations with people who have worked with one of the top cellists on Sound Better.
This is the guy that ranked number one, essentially.
Somewhere up there. Okay. I don't want to out anyone because I think they all do phenomenal work.
Yeah.
But several people have come to me and said, yeah, I've worked with like those people and they did good work. I liked their stuff. I released the song. I was happy with it, but something was missing. Mm-hmm. Something was missing from the process, from the end product. I didn't feel as connected to it as I could.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite part about what I do. And I don't feel like Sound Better enables that.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like to even have a call with a client on Sound Better, you're breaking terms of service.
Yeah.
So I couldn't hop on a video call and connect with someone and understand, why did you write this song?
Yeah.
Why is this the thing you're releasing? Why did you choose to approach the production like this?
Right.
I get so much information about what goes into the final product from those conversations. And Sound Better just didn't allow that.
Right.
And it broke the process to me and made it feel less human.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's so fascinating because you went from Sound Better, which should theoretically be more human than Instagram, right? Because Instagram is like a one-to-many platform, right? At least Sound Better, there's a target, like you know what you're looking for, you know who to talk to. But it sounds like that DM mechanism was actually the part that allowed you to cross that chasm, right? And like actually communicate. Yeah, it's so funny because like, you know, as we're building out Tonic, like right now, you can only build so much, right? You want to build the whole platform and the whole umbrella, right? So that everything is in sync, right? Like your storage is there so that you can link to your song and your conversations and the communities. All your feedback's there. You know, you want theoretically to also have high res video so that you can actually talk to each other about, you know, listen to the mix together, things like that.
Yeah.
But there's also like this fear that like if you become that one big platform that like there's a term that Cory Doctorow, he was like an activist, an author, he's a science fiction author, he's also an activist, super cool dude, but he talks about the enshittification of apps, right? And I think that's what we're all feeling right now is like I go on Facebook and I'm like I want to throw up being there already. Like just like the thought of getting on there makes my stomach kind of turn.
Yeah.
And then I get on there and then I'm kind of grateful because I'm like, I wouldn't be able to DM this person I went to school with because I don't have their phone number. So it's nice to be able to ask them this random question about high school or something that I'd forgotten about. But on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't like there aren't that many light bulb moments that make me feel really connected to people. And same with Instagram, right? Like it's probably my favorite at the moment. Twitter, if I can build some rapport with some people and build relationships, then I feel a little bit like I appreciate the platform a little more. But just on a fire hose, just feeding me doom scrolling, like I don't feel connected to the world at all. So that was like one of our big things was like these platforms are becoming enshittified essentially. And the basic gist of that is just that they've been commoditized so hard. Like people have given away all their information. They're monetizing those people's information in the form of ads. And there's no value there that feels authentic anymore. It just feels like a machine that's only serving itself at this point. And so we're really, really, really conscious of that because like we want people to feel more connected to their works and more like a couple of things we want people to feel. We want them to feel like we respect their works, like their works of art are respectable, whether or not they get praise from other organizations, entities, people. There's no amount of validation that makes your work more valuable than others. Right? The second thing is like just plain connection. Like you should feel connected to your work. You should feel connected to your collaborators. You should feel like, and I think you described it perfectly when you described the relationship between somebody who is getting a service done for them, which you could really just get from AI at this point. I mean, there's some generative AI stuff. If you're going to go that route where you're going to just like pay for a service and get it delivered to you, but you're not going to have a relationship with the provider and you're not going to understand kind of like the whole holistic approach of how they created that arrangement, you know, how it connects to you, all those things, then like, that's fine. But personally, I'm like, that's what generative AI is for in my mind. I'm like, go do that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a great use case for that. But if you want to connect to your music and be connected and in your body feeling things rather than thinking things, the best way to do that is to really connect with people you're collaborating with. I think that's why things like DMs are so important to us, even though, you know, when we look at our business model and possible business models that we could expand to, like a marketplace, for example. Marketplaces historically, like you go on an Airbnb, for example, they don't want you DMing people. You know what I mean? Like, because then you have the ability to reroute your payment. You know what I mean? You have ability to talk to Harley and be like, I want to pay you through Venmo. I don't want to pay you through the platform that takes this percentage or whatever. So it's really important to us to find other business models that don't make the platform hamstrung by its own lack of imagination when it comes to making money, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
That is so well said.
I don't know how else to put it. I'm like, it's a lack of imagination, or and for some companies, I think it's just plain greed. Like when you go public, you have to make decisions that first and foremost are, you know, increasing your stock price essentially, you know, and your shareholders. So for us, like, it's super important that we do not build our app in that way that is not serving the customer, which is the musicians. So
this is why I love you all.
Oh,
I'm excited.
It's really exciting, right? It's really exciting. And I think when I talk to people like you, I love it because we get to co-create, right, in this process. And so, like, Harley and I met. I DM'd Harley on Instagram, was able to communicate with them, was able to get to know them better. I already kind of liked their vibe and already knew I would probably get along with Harley, but who knows, right? Sometimes it doesn't work out. But, like, I've been able to get feedback from Harley, and then he's been able to, like, impact the product roadmap, right? Like little things like that. So I think everything is a collaboration, from the way we build our app to the way that our users are going to build relationships on our platform. And I just hope that we can make a more connected world through this, and not a more, I think it's really important, like, to not feel alone in this, you know?
And it is so easy to feel alone, to get stuck in that. Like when I was learning production, I'm alone in a room. I'm learning things by watching YouTube videos and poking buttons on a computer. Yeah. And still, I'm alone in this studio physically.
Yeah.
But being able to have this camera, this microphone, and this conversation, being able to collaborate and connect with people all over the world. Like, I don't know. I always know what time it is in London when I think about it quickly now, because I have so many people in the UK that I work with.
Yes.
So in that way, this ability to collaborate, I physically am more alone a lot of the time, but I feel so much more connected to the world around me, which is so exciting.
Yes. That's like the exact feeling that I feel as well. It's amazing. Like, I mean, and I'm alone in my house right now, pretty much. I have my dog right here, and I feel so connected to the world just having this conversation, right? Yeah. So that's amazing. So, well, thank you so much for your time. We'll wrap up here so you can get to actually recording today, which is what you need to do. I let this go on way longer than any other episode that we've had so far, because I just love talking to you. So thank you for being so fun to talk to.
Oh, well, thank you for giving me the space and time, and I'm sorry for talking your ear off.
Oh, no. I actually apologize for, an hour and 18 minutes is not that long. This is perfect. So, and I think you gave so much, you gave us so much to think about, and I think musicians are going to just love hearing your process and feel less alone, just hearing how much of a struggle it was for you and how you were able to fight through it. And, I hope that we can continue these conversations and continue working together, because it's a blast.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope that it is as good as it can possibly be today.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Bye, Harley.
Bye.